It's a gift. If you don't see me at DHCD anymore, you'll know where I went.
Yeah, I think that's a great career choice for you. I appreciate the music.
Thank you.
I want to clarify something from our previous module about the timing of the request of release of funds and certification for the overall 5-year period of the environmental review. We're going to go more in depth on that when we talk about our calendar tomorrow and how you fill out the request of release of forms and certification. But I just want to let anybody know that's confused about that. We'll go over it more. Remind me, ask questions if you still don't get it after tomorrow. So with that being said, let's move on to how we determine the level of review. Okay, so what are the levels of the review? So not unlike snowflakes or dog nose prints, every single project that DHCD funds is different. Instead of having a different template for every single project we do, we group projects together by level of environmental review determination. And we use HUD guidance on how we review environmental review records for each project per its level of determination. And projects are given a level of determination by what activities are undertaken and what the likelihood of environmental impact will be. From this slide, which lists the least intensive level of review to the most intensive level of review, projects that have a low likelihood of impacting the environment would be exempt or categorically excluded, not subject to the laws at 58.5, also known as C-E-N-S-T, because I'm not going to say that whole thing every time we talk about it. Projects of this type would usually involve the payment of administration costs or projects where nothing is being constructed at all. And if you move to the most intensive level of review, these projects require an environmental impact statement, also known as an EIS. And these are projects that have a high probability that they will affect the environment. An example of a project that would require an environmental impact statement would be something like a highway or an airport being constructed. A project can also require an environmental impact statement if the cultural or historical environment could be impacted. So if you excavate something and you uncover Native American tribal artifacts, for example, that would perhaps require an environmental impact statement. And we will talk more about this later. But if you have a project that you have even the inkling of that you think may require an environmental impact statement, please contact your CDS immediately so we can talk about how we're going to get through that project. All right, and I hope you can see this. It's very, very small, and I apologize, but this chart, which everybody can find, it's the Appendix 2 flow chart in the Grant Management Manual, and it shows a breakdown of all the different levels of review and how to complete the environmental review process for each project type. So projects move from left to right depending on how complicated and how much an environmental impact a project may have. I'd like to draw your attention to the pink box, or it could be salmon colored, depending on your preference, in the lower left-hand corner. If you notice, the related acts at 24 CFR 58.6 applies to all CDBG projects. I've talked about it before, but I'll talk about it again, and I'll continue talking about it again. Doesn't matter if a project is exempt or not. 24 CFR 58.6 applies to every single one of them. And those are Flood Insurance, Coastal Barrier Resources Act, and Airport Hazard / Runway Clear Zones. And these are the only things that apply across the board for all projects. And I know that we're moving to a digital world, but I would highly suggest, if you're completing a lot of environmental reviews, to print this out and stick it on your corkboard or something. I have this at my home and at my work office, so it is very useful. And that is Appendix 2 flowchart, which is available on our website as well. So that one was a short module. So we're going to do a little bit of a quizzy poo. True or false? All projects' environmental review records are completed the same way, regardless of level of environmental review determination.
False.
False. That is correct. I don't know who unmuted themselves and said that, but
Kenny Rogers.
Awesome. Good job, Kenny. And that is true. So differing levels of environmental review can require different environmental review records. True or false? An exempt project does not have to comply with the related acts found at 24 CFR 58.6, including flood insurance, Coastal Burial Resources Act, and Runway Clear Zone requirements. Awesome. That is also false. If you take one thing from this training, I hope that this is what you take from it and you remember this. All right. So any questions before we actually get into our levels of review? No questions. That is wonderful. Let me get my other PowerPoint up. Oh, not that. Oh, Ellen, that link of the flow chart, I can post it afterwards at the end, or if somebody beats me to it from DHCD, we can do that as well, but I'm going to make a little note right quick. And I will post it in the chat. And if you want, at the end of the presentations, when I send out all the information I'm going to send out, we can put it in there as well. All right, thank you, Sherry. Okay, so moving on to the least intensive levels of review, and that is exempt and categorically excluded, not subject to levels of review. Also, I'd like to point out finding memes and clip art for an environmental review PowerPoint was harder than I imagined. That took quite a while, so I hope you all are appreciating the clip art and the memes. So why are we grouping together, first and foremost, exempt projects and categorically excluded, not subject to, together? And that's because they are very, 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 very similar. In fact, they have the same requirements and they follow the same certification process. The biggest difference is that they have different qualifying activities. So that is really the only difference between exempt and categorically excluded, not subject to, is what activities are being undertaken during the project. And both categories of activities involve activities that are deemed not to affect the human and or physical environment. So that basically means no construction, no disturbance of earth, dirt will not be turned. And remember that neither project type for exempt or categorically excluded, not subject to, requires a request of release of funds and certification form, and it does not require any publication or posting of FONSIs or combined notices. Okay. Exempt activities are those activities for which there's a limited environmental review requirement. As you can see from this slide, there are quite a few exempt activities, but none of these would impact the environment. Therefore, they are exempt from the environmental requirements of the NEPA and federal authorities, laws, executive orders, and regulations, other than those contained at 58.6, because like I said, every project is under the purview of 24 CFR 58.6. Most of our COVID projects are exempt as they fall under the purview of public services. Now, if you look at what kind of activities exempt projects have, you can do environmental studies, plans, and strategies, information and financial services, admin and management expenses, public services, which I said most of our COVID projects fall underneath, and they will not result in physical changes. So if you had a COVID project that is actually going to construct, let's say, a food bank, that would not be an exempt project. But if you had a COVID project that was just going to use money to pay for a food bank for food delivery, that would be an exempt project. Inspection and testing properties for hazards and defects, so lead testing, lead hazard, purchase of insurance, purchase of tools, engineering or design costs, and technical assistance or training. Now, how do you actually complete the environmental review record for an exempt project? So per our manual, we have the 2017 Grant Management Manual, and that is on our website. I can also email you a copy. If you're really nice, I can put it on a flash drive and mail it to you. But in Appendix 2A, page 23, the steps for completing the environmental review record for an exempt project are the completion of certification of exemption or categorically excluded, not subject to section 58.5, which is Appendix 2BA in the manual, and the completion of a designation of a certifying officer if necessary. So once again, if the mayor or the chair of the Board of Supervisors isn't signing it, it's a town manager, we need a designation of certifying officer. So this does not require the publication or posting of the combined notice or the request of release of funds and certification. So you're done. Very easy to do an environmental review for an exempt project. So let's see what an exempt environmental review record looks like. And bear with me, I'm hoping the technology works. I tried it out. Can you see that by any chance? Any stretch of the imagination? It's a Word document. No.
Not yet.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Give me 1 second. How about now?
It's coming.
Is it
Yeah.
coming? All right. So this is what environmental review for an exempt project looks like. We've got our name right here. There's going to be a community employment project. And as you could see from our previous slide on exempt activities, that would fall under the purview of public services involving employment. The responsible entity is also the grantee, who is the town of Possumville. We've got our DHCD number right here. You've got your preparer. You got your certifying officer name and title. Unfortunately, this is a town manager, so we will have to have an attachment for the designation of signature. We've got our consultant. We've got our project location, and we have our description of the proposed project. This project will provide employment training to residents of Possumville by offering resume preparation and interview skill courses to primarily low and moderate income individuals at the Possumville Community Center. Funding will be used to pay for supplies incidental to the program, including 4 new computers and furniture, including 3 new desks and 6 new chairs. I apologize about the train. I could either stay at home and we could have a dog barking, or I could come to the office and have a train. I took the train, obviously.
Hey, Kelly, did you do an environmental review on the noise of that train at your home?
Actually, you know what? It needs to be farther away from me. All right, it's about done. Okay. So we'll say that funding will be used to pay for supplies incidental to the program, including 4 new computers and furniture, including 3 new desks and 6 new chairs. This project anticipates serving 100 participants within the first 6 months of the project, with 63 individuals being LMI. Participants will benefit from improved job-seeking skills that will provide improved employment. So that's our description. And here's our level of environmental review determination. This project is determined to be exempt under 58.34 as providing public service that will not result in physical change, including public services related to employment. And I added that part in because I want to say why the project is exempt. We've got our funding information right down here. This is the DHCD grant number. This is the program, and this is the funding amount. We have to put our CDBG funding amount, and the project also got some ARC area development funding. So we're going to put this under here under $50,000, and then the project is $100,000. So this is 58.6 laws and authorities. Like I said, the ones that everybody has to follow. So on the left, we see what the statutes or executive orders are the project's formal compliance steps or mitigation required, and then compliance determinations. So number 1 is airport runway clear zones and accident potential zones. And It is not required for any compliance steps or mitigation because the project is not located near an airport. The closest airport is 20 miles away. No construction will occur as project is only for public service type project. Next one is coastal barrier resources. We click no again because the project is not located near any coastal barriers. The coast is approximately 300 miles from project site. No construction will occur as project is only for public service type project. And the last one, which is flood insurance. I want to apologize again. This is the longest train I think we've ever had in Abington in the 5 years I've been here. So apologies for that. But so we put no that there's no regular formal compliance or mitigation steps because the locality participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. No construction will occur as projects is only for public service type. So downhill, we'll go down to the mitigation measures and conditions. No mitigation is required for any of the above listed authorities or related laws under 24 CFR Part 58.6. But let's say that the project was near an airport. We would have to show compliance. We would show a map, and we would show that we're not doing anything near the airport. So you still have to comply with that, and you still have to, if you have to do mitigation measures, these three things, even if a project is exempt, you have to comply with it, you have to show your determination, and you have to provide documentation. And down here, I'm the preparer, so I signed it. Billy Badger is a town manager, and he signed it. So we have this attachment down here, which is a designation of certifying officer and environmental responsibility certification. And the chief elected official, the mayor, gave the town manager certifying duties. So this is what an exempt environmental review record looks like. And bear with me so I can get back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So, like I said, the only difference between exempt projects and categorically excluded projects are the project activities. So just like an exempt project, there are a few categories that fall into the level of C-E-Mst. The biggest hurdle in preparing environmental reviews for exempt and categorically excluded not subject to projects is determining which activity your project falls under. So activities for C-E-Mst projects are tenant-based rental assistance. For example, the DHCD rent relief program was a categorically excluded, not subject to project. Supportive services not. Oh, I have some questions. Must the elected body pass a resolution authorizing the chief official to assign? Yes, we want the designation to be adopted in front of the council or the board of supervisors during the pre-contract phase. So we want that to be adopted when you're adopting all your other things like your non-discrimination, so on and so forth. Wonderful. Oh, let me go back. So supportive services are categorically excluded, not subject to projects, and that is including but not limited to healthcare, housing services, permanent housing placement, daycare, nutritional services, short-term payments for rent, mortgage, utility costs, and assistance in gaining access to local, state, and federal government benefits and services. I'm here to tell you right now that it sometimes is very confusing to determine if a project is public service or if it's a supportive service. Luckily, HUD does give us a little bit of maximum feasible deference in determining that, but if you have questions on whether your project activity would be C-E-Mst or exempt, contact your community development specialist and we can figure it out. Other C-E-Mst projects would be paying for operating costs, including maintenance, utilities, furnishings, equipment, supplies, staff training and recruitment, economic development activities that don't require any construction or expansion of existing operations, and activities to assist home buyers to purchase existing dwelling units or dwelling units under construction. So how do we complete the environmental review record for the C-E-Mst project? Well, it is the exact same as the exempt project, except we check a different box. So once again, like with an exempt project, you'll look at Appendix 2A, page 23 to get the steps. You'll complete Appendix 2BA. You'll complete your designation of certifying officer if necessary, and you will not publish your combined notice or your request of release of funds and certifications. So let's see what it looks like. Okay. Bear with me one more time. I think you all can see that. So this is the community daycare project, which is going to fall under the supportive services purview. And like I said, it's pretty much the exact same project. It is the exact same form and everything else. The only thing we do is we check this box, which is Exempt Activity Project is categorically excluded, not subject to, instead of the exempt box. And I added this part. It's determined to be categorically excluded underneath 5835 subpart B, as the project will provide supportive services including childcare. No construction or disturbance to the environment will occur. We've got our funding amount. We've got our estimated project costs. And we've got our statutes, executive orders, and compliance with these things. Once again, there will be no mitigation measures and conditions, but if there were, you would add these in here and you would put your determination and your source documentation on this side. And we signed it and we did our designation again. So like I said, same exact process, just checking a different box and different activities. So now you can see why I grouped them together. Okay, so another knowledge check. Don't everybody get excited at once. I hope y'all are keeping score so that you can have, why is that not exempt again? Okay, let me go back to that. So let me go back a couple of slides for that, Joanne. So that project, the one we were just talking about, was a daycare project. So it is it is categorically excluded, not subject to, because it falls under the purview of supportive services, including but not limited to, and in here we have daycare. So that is categorically excluded, not subject to. It's one of the activities. But, you know, like I said, HUD gives us a little bit of maximal feasible deference as to what we classify them as, but I specifically chose childcare just because it was one of the activities that were definitely listed. Like I said, that's the biggest issue with exempt and categorically excluded, not subject to projects, is that the activities are different, but they overlap, so it is a little confusing. Wonderful. Okay, knowledge check. Would it be subject if they were building a daycare center? That's a great question. That would actually be an environmental assessment level of project because they are constructing something entirely new. And there will be a lot of, there we go. So projects that are exempt, categorically excluded, not subject to, are deemed to not affect the environment as no construction will occur. Is this true or false? That's true. So these levels of project do not affect the human environment, physical environment, or cultural environment in any significant way. Okay, true or false? Exempt, categorically excluded projects have to post a combined notice and fill out a request of release of funds and certification form. False. Joanne got that one off the bat. You do not have to do that if a project is exempt or categorically excluded. It really only takes about an hour to do an environmental review record for exempt and C-E-Mst projects. So you should hope that you get those. And how do you figure out if a project is exempt versus C-E-Mst? Well, you go by the activities undertaken by the project. And I've got this website, which is the federal regs of what activities are for exempt. And that's under section 58.34. And then for activities that are C-E-Mst, that's section 58.35. And I can send these links if you all want them at the end of the training. Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm going to make a note to send that link as well. You want any and everything? Great. I have a lot to send you then. Don't get mad at me when you get a lot of things. And I can send the 2 BA samples. Do you want me to take Possumville off of it, EB, or do we want to leave Possumville on there?
Sorry, I can't type fast enough. No, I would love it if you left the sample in. I'd love to be able to show my grantees what a good sample would look like. Thank you.
I will definitely send that out. Okay. Y'all are awfully quiet, so I'm either doing an amazing job or you all are tired of my voice and you do not want to be here anymore. So I hope it's the first one and not the second one. Okay, let's move on to categorically excluded subject 2 levels of review. Let me switch my module out. Okay. Present. All right. I think you all can see that. Once again, very hard to find memes and clip art, so I really hope you appreciate that. Okay, so this level of environmental review is slightly more intensive than the exempt and categorically excluded levels of review. So what exactly is a categorically excluded subject 2 project, also known as a CEST project? And this category is for projects where construction involves only the replacement or renovation of existing facilities or structures and where there is no disturbance to previously undisturbed natural or built environment. So if construction has already happened on a site, the project may fall into the CES level of determination. Both then categories include activities which are deemed not to affect. Oh, I'm sorry about that. That was the wrong note for that slide. But the biggest example I can give for projects like this is the replacement of existing water lines. So if you're doing a 1-for-1 replacement of water line or sewer line, that would be a categorically excluded subject 2 project. So underneath 24 CFR 58, subpart 35, subpart A, project activities include the acquisition, repair, improvement, reconstruction, or rehabilitation of public facilities and improvements other than buildings. And these are facilities that are already in place, and there cannot be more than a 20% change in size or capacity or scope, whether that is an increase or a decrease. So remember that. And there is no change in land use. You can do the removal of architectural barriers that restrict accessibility and the rehabilitation of buildings and improvements. And for residential structures of 1 to 4 units, you can't do more than 4 units at a time and no change in land use. And that is specifically for our housing rehab projects. And for multifamily residential structures, density does not change more than 20%, plus or minus. There is no change in land use, and cost of rehab is less than 75% of replacement cost after rehab. The commercial, industrial, and public buildings, and if the size and capacity is not changed more than 20%, and there's no change in land use. Certain housing rehab projects, most rehab projects fall under this level of review. There are some caveats. Every housing rehab project is different as far as is what I have realized. But if you are unsure if a project is a categorically excluded subject to project or an environmental assessment level review, I'm going to go ahead and give you this little tip. Go ahead and complete an environmental assessment level review. It's better to do more than it is to do less. So projects that are categorically excluded subject to, like I said, the land has already been previously disturbed, and there will be no more than a 20% decrease or increase in project size or scope. And something I want to point out is, and this is very confusing, but a categorically excluded would substantial rehab on the same footprint be categorically excluded subject to? Yes, providing we don't have to do any mitigation measures such as underground oil tank, floodplain, so on and so forth, as long as there's no mitigation measures required. But 9 times out of 10, substantial reconstruction on the same footprint would be categorically excluded subject to. I have some information in my big book, which I can send to you about the size and how close the houses need to be together. But for the most part, substantial reconstruction for housing rehab is categorically excluded subject to. All right. So this is a little tricky, but categorically excluded subject to projects can convert to exempt projects. So if any of the categorically excluded subject to activities, which we had on the previous page, and they're found at 24 CFR Part 58, subsection 35A, and they do not trigger compliance findings. So if you go through the entire statutory checklist and there is no mitigation measures required, it does not trigger any mitigation, the project would then convert to exempt. And then you would complete the statutory checklist in 2A on pages 5 to 6. Once again, if no compliance findings, the project would convert to exempt, and you would fill out Appendix 2BA, just like the previous levels of determination, and complete the designation of certifying officer if necessary. And there are no publication or posting requirements for categorically excluded subject to projects that convert to exempt. So, and this is what the statutory checklist for all projects other than exempt and categorically excluded subject to, not subject to projects looks like. We're going to use a water line replacement example once again. And if this project, which is a 1-for-1 water line replacement, which is an activity under the CES level of determination, does not trigger compliance finding for any of these statutes. So meaning, for example, the project is not in a floodplain, or there are no contamination of toxic substances, etc., so forth, the project would then convert to exempt. And then if the project converts to exempt, you will check this box at the bottom of the statutory checklist that you completed, stating that box A has been checked for all authorities and there are no compliance findings. You will then fill out Appendix 2BA, which we did for exempt and C-E-Mst levels, and you will continue on. But what happens if your project, your CEST project, does not convert to exempt? So per the 2017 Grant Management Manual in Appendix 2A, page 23, these are the steps for that. So you would complete your statutory checklist on Appendix 2A, pages 5 through 6, and then you would use the worksheet on the following pages to help you complete, to see if you need to do mitigation measures or not. You would do the completion of certification excluded if the project converts to exempt. You would do the completion of designation of certifying officer. And if necessary, you would do the completion of the floodplain and wetland 8-step process, which we'll go over later in detail. And then you would do the combined notice and the RROFC. So those are required for projects that do not convert to exempt. So here is a categorically excluded environmental review record example that does not convert to exempt. So like I said, a lot of moving and shaking going on in Possumville. They need to add an accessibility ramp to their courthouse. It was built in 1910 and is adjacent to the town's historic district. I'm the grant manager, and I have looked at Appendix 2.1 in our manual, which lists the DHR list of excluded activities. And under those activities, it states that excluded activities include alterations necessary to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act or to improve handicapped accessibility for current or anticipated residents of properties which are carried out in accordance with the preservation brief number 32, making historic properties accessible. Unfortunately, when we went to design our new accessibility ramp for our courthouse, there's no way to make it look historic. There is no way to make it look like it fits into the building. So we need to consult with DHR. And we need to consult with DHR because the building is over 50 years old. It's adjacent to our town's historic district. And we need to consult with DHR. And that is the first statute or authority under 24 CFR 58.5. And that's under the Section 106 guidelines. So what we did, what the grant manager made sure to do, was to document what the compliance finding was and what source documentation was and how it could be found if anybody reviewed it. And I cannot believe there's another train. We just had a train. I apologize for that. Someone should call Abington and tell them to stop letting trains run through so much. So, and I don't know if you can see this, but under compliance finding under the C-E-Mst environmental review record example, this project will involve the construction of a wheelchair accessible ramp at the front of Possumville's courthouse, which is deemed a historic structure and contributing structure to the town's designated historic district. So what source documentation do we need to do? What compliance do we need to do? So DHR consultation on 8/21/2025 via email, Appendix 5, page 7 in our environmental review record. So we've told them what we've done and where to find it. We've also had DHR consultation via letter on 10/11/25. We've told them where to find it. And it requires a programmatic agreement between DHR, Department of Historic Resources, and the town of Possumville. The programmatic agreement has been included in the environmental review record, Appendix 5, page 9, and the combined notice has been disseminated to DHR. Because DHR was an interested party in this environmental review record, we have to send the combined notice to DHR because they could say, hey, no, we actually do find findings. And I'd like to point out something as well. If your project requires a programmatic agreement with DHR, until you get that programmatic agreement signed, we will not let you post the combined notice, and we will not issue your request of release of funds and certification. So that's just something to put underneath your hat. So the next part of this example, we're going to check this box at the bottom of the statutory checklist, complete with the pertinent compliance requirements, which in this case requires consultation with DHR and a programmatic agreement, publication and posting of the combined notice, request of release of funds to go to DHCD, and the issuance of a contract. So, and I know you can't see it very well, but box B has been checked for one or more authority. For categorically excluded actions pursuant to 58.35A, this project cannot convert to exempt since one or more authority requires compliance. So you would finish your publications, your postings, you would get your request of release of funds, and then we could issue you a contract. So again, directly below the previous section on the statutory checklist, the grant manager would describe what mitigation measures we're going to take, which in this case is the programmatic agreement with DHR, and make sure if a project requires a programmatic agreement with DHR or if a project requires any mitigation measures, you document that in your request of release of funds and certification. Okay, that one was a lot of information and a lot more in-depth than our previous ones. So let's see which ones, who's got the right answers. So true or false, do not publish combined notice, combined FONSI, or the request of release of funds until DHR programmatic agreement signed off on by all parties. That is very true, Joanne. Thank you for asking that. I was going to talk about that also again when we go through section 106, but it is a great thing to bring up all the time, because DHR can really slow a project down if you do not get a programmatic agreement and they need one. Okay. For our first question, CEST projects involve renovation, replacement, and previously undisturbed land. So that is false. CEST projects involve work and previously disturbed land. So you've disturbed it. VDOT right away is one of those examples with some caveats. Question number 2, acquisition, repair, improvement, reconstruction, or rehabilitation of public facilities and improvements can occur with well, you saw the answer now. It's another freebie. With CES projects, as long as no more than blank % of change, either increase or decrease of project size and scope, and that magic number is 20%. So good rule of thumb to keep and to remember. Number 3, true or false, CEST project can convert to exempt if it does not trigger any compliance findings for related laws found at, which one of these? 24 CFR 58.5, 24 CFR 58.6, or 24 CFR 58.7. If anybody gets this one, I think legally we have to hire you to take my job. So that is 24 CFR 58.5. Remember, all projects are subject to 24 CFR 58. Any questions with this module?
So Kelly, I'm a little confused. Why would acquisition require an EA?
Why would acquisition?
Because you're not disturbing land in any way if you acquire a property.
Acquisition is under CES. Let me go back.
Am I misreading it?
I believe. Okay, so under CEST, acquisition is a project activity. So it would be a CEST level of review.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had that same language on the last slide.
Oh, no, I apologize. I may have, but.
Okay, thank you. That's less confusing.
That's less confusing. That's great. Any other questions? Nope. All righty. Well, we're going to get out early today because I thought that this would take much longer than it did. I thought there would be more questions. So let's do a recap of what we have done for today. Let me pull this up. One second. From beginning. Okay. So this is all that we have covered for today. Do we have any questions on anything we learned about the background, which is the environmental review record, or DHCD's role in environmental review record project or process, the project description, map or aggregation, level of review determination, exempt or categorically excluded, not subject to level of review, or categorically excluded, subject to level of review? Any questions, comments, concerns about any of this? It seems like no. So I'm going to ask everybody a question. We want specifically the regs for categorically excluded, not subject to, categorically excluded, subject to, and exempt projects. We want a good version of an environmental review record. We want the examples that I've shown so far. Is there anything else that we need? Oh, we also needed the flow chart. Somebody wanted a link to the flow chart from Appendix 2. And anything else I have to send? Is there anything else from today's training that you need or I can send, or anybody has any questions on or wants? All right. Well, if Sherry or Amanda don't have anything to say, I guess we will pick this up tomorrow.
Just thanks for being with us. Appreciate the attention. Kelly, awesome job. Entertaining, informative, all of it wrapped up into one. We're looking forward to tomorrow. We appreciate everybody's joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Kelly, could you hang on for just a second?